All right, well, let's get started, folks. So happy Tuesday, everyone, to wherever you are in the world and in Canada. And welcome to the interview of Gail Bowen and Candas Jane Dorsey, brought to you by ECW Press, the publisher of Gail and Candas's latest masterpieces. My name is Anthony Bidulka, and I'm a fellow Canadian mystery writer. And first off, I need to say just how thrilled I am to have been asked to host this momentous event celebrating the release of books by two of Canada's most renowned and, dare I say, beloved authors. Gail's newest book, Legacy, right here, is being released 1 week from today on August 24th. And Candas's latest, He Wasn't There Again Today, is fresh off the presses and released 1 week ago on October 10th. Now, both titles will be or are already available anywhere online, or better yet, from your favorite local bookstore. Now, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A function. Behind the scenes today, we've got Emily Barsava, who is an ECW publicist, and Emily is going to be adding into the Q&A function a link that will tell you where you can order, or in Gail's case, pre-order these books. Also, throughout our time together, if you should happen to come up with any questions that I haven't thought of, you can write them down in the Q&A section, and we will do our best to get to them as time allows. The other thing that I did want to mention is that if you or someone you know would like to see a recording of this event, all you need to do is go to the ECW YouTube channel, and it will be up there. I'm not sure how quickly after today, but it should be fairly quickly. If you have any issues finding it, you can email either myself or Gail or Candas, and we will be happy to send you a link to that YouTube channel that's going to show this wonderful interview. Now, our plan for today is that we're going to spend about the next hour in conversation with Gail and Candas, and we're going to be discussing their new books a little bit, but I also plan to do a little digging into their experiences as writers, because I know they both have plenty of wisdom to share with us. So let's move on to the main event. And we're going to begin with introductions, even though I'm kind of guessing that most people don't need introductions, but I am always looking for an opportunity to say complimentary things about these two writers. So let's begin with Gail Bowen. Now, Gail's first Joanne Kilbourne mystery was called Deadly Appearances, and it was released in 1990. There are now, I believe, is this number 23, Gail, or 24?
I think this is number 22. I'm really embarrassed about that, because I'm working on number 23, which is almost finished. Hello, Jack.
Absolutely. All right, so we've got 22 books.
I'm just speaking to my publisher, because I have promises, but by the end of October, absolutely. Halloween.
All right. Well, you better. I mean, only 23 books, Gail. What are you doing? So that first book in the Joanne series was nominated for a W.H. Smith Books in Canada Best First Novel Award. And then later, A Colder Kind of Death, which came out, I believe, in 1995, won the Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence, which used to be known as the Arthur Ellis Award. And that was for Best Crime Novel. Then The Winner's Circle was named a finalist for that same award. Gail has also written 4 Charlie D books. She's written plays that have been produced across Canada and on CBC Radio. She's written a standalone novel. And in 2018, she wrote a really important book called Sleuth. And this is a practical, really smart, really funny guide to help any people who are aspiring to be crime writers. So if that's any of you, you need to pick up Sleuth. In 2008, and listen to all this, Reader's Digest named Gail Canada's Best Mystery Novelist. In 2009, she received the Derek Murdoch Award from the Crime Writers of Canada. In 2018, she was recognized with the Crime Writers of Canada Grand Master Award, and then that same year was invested with the Saskatchewan Order of Merit, which is our province's highest honor. Gail's now retired from teaching at the First Nations University, and she lives in Regina, which is just down the highway from where I am in Saskatoon. Now, let's move on to Candas Jane Dorsey. Now, Candas is an internationally known, award-winning writer of a really wide range of fiction, nonfiction, screenplays, educational television scripts. She's an editor, a former publisher. She's a community builder. She's an activist, and she lives in Edmonton. The first title in the Epitome Apartment series was published in Britain, and I just have to say this, the German translation appeared under the title Drag Cop. Now, you gotta love that, right?
Oh, yeah.
The second book won a
And look at the cover.
Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence. And today we're celebrating the release of the third book in that series. She has taught writing and other topics to adults and youth in universities and continuing education programs since the 1980s. She is a partner in Wooden Door and Associates, which is a professional communications consulting company in Edmonton. She was the founding president of Speculative Fiction Canada, and she also spent time as president of the Writers Guild of Alberta. I'm losing my breath saying all this stuff about these two. 2005, Candas was awarded with the province of Alberta Centennial Gold Medal, and in 2017, the WGA Golden Pen Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Literary Arts. She was inducted into the City of Edmonton Arts and Cultural Hall of Fame in 2019. And then there's just so many others, but also inducted into the Canadian Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame. She won the YWCA Woman of the Year Award for Arts and Culture. And because that's not enough, Candas is also a visual artist. So as all of you can see, we have a couple of never-do-wells today, but let's see what we can get out of these two. Let's move on and start talking about murder. Now, yes, the first question that I want to get to is, it's about world building. And it's something that I think the two of you do quite extensively over the course of your series, so that when you get into your later books, and even, by book 3, Candas and yours, your reader and you are dealing with a great number of characters and, really a rich amount of background and backstory. Yet to my eye, I think the two of you do this in very different ways. Candas, I want to start with you. He wasn't there again today. It's the third in this series. And we have the return of the queer amateur accidental detective who is both working to solve a murder that happens, literally quite close to home. And at the same time, she's trying to convince police that she's not a murderer. When it comes to dealing with backstory and other purposes too, I think, you think nothing of breaking the fourth wall. You use a great number of footnotes. And I think even early on in this book, you say something like, to the reader, you say, if you haven't read some of the earlier books, you probably should. That just made me laugh out loud. Did this way of writing come organically to you? Is this just the way you write, or did you come up with this by necessity because as you built up the series, you realized you needed some way to communicate all of this to your readers?
Yes and no, for both. When I set out to do these, let's take two sentences before. I think after you get to a certain age as a writer, you can abandon a lot of your angst and just do it. Just like not worry as much. Because, I was thinking as you named all of my achievements that if you live long enough, you will have a long list of things that you do, But I found when I sat down to write the earlier mysteries that I just kind of let her rip. but then of course that sets up a whole set of characters and circumstances, and I actually found it harder in the third book to balance that thing about, you know, backstory and what you have to tell the reader to make this make sense. So I just decided I already was having fun with the whole Dear Reader type of voice, which I love. I love Dear Reader. I always have. You know, the book, when I was a kid, the book would say Dear Reader, and I would go, well, that's me. So so I just went for it. I just said, here's the backstory, you know, and if you want to know more, you have to read these other books, which you know, because the narrator is first person, the narrator can claim the books rather than me, right? And say, you know, I wrote these about my adventures, so you should go read them, sort of thing. So I kind of did that, but I still had to cut myself back a lot. And the other thing that I find, and I'd love to hear from Gail about how you managed this so well in so many more books than 3, is I really wanted to avoid that thing where you have the list of all your beloved characters and the tick box beside them, and you have to refer to, you know, the beloved person so that your readers will be caught up with them, but they're not really in the story. And I even notice, I mean, I'm a great admirer of Louise Penny, but I even noticed in a couple of her recent books that I felt that there were some scenes that were just there to tick off the boxes so the readers would know how the duck was doing, you know. And so I find that one of the things that's making sort of book 4 harder to sort out is how you continue to tell the same story but also a new story. So most of these books have been actually kind of easy for me because I don't fuss too much about them anymore. I'm just having, and I have to draw a distinction between my fun and the fun in the books, because serious things happen in the books, but me as a writer, I'm having more fun in these last 3 books than I have in previous books. So that is the encouraging part. But then there's this question of series management, and I haven't really had to face that before. So, you know, I'm really waiting for Gail's answer, because I really want to hear how you do that.
With each book in a long series, you're collecting more characters and more backstory. And it's you know, one of the things that I noticed about your books, Gail, and I think it goes back to An Image in the Lake. I think it's the first time that I noticed that you started having a character guide at the beginning of the book. And I don't know if that was just the publisher's decision or something that you thought, you know, you needed or the readers needed. So could you maybe talk about that, and then maybe answer Candace's question to you, like how do you do it so seamlessly, you know, by book 22?
Well, of course, I did not plan what I wrote, number 1. I mean, this book, and I think what I want to add one thing to what we're all talking about, and that is that I noticed, Tony, when I was reading the information about your books, that you talk about the importance of, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to get screwed up, the underrepresented, and I think and in all of us writing about the underrepresented. And that took me back, and it's weird. Well, also, I mean, I taught university, and so I still see these things in a teacher's way. And I thought, all right, why does the underrepresented? How do you? First of all, I believe absolutely that is something that should be done. But secondly, how do you do it without it seeming too awkward, or, oh, here comes X, you know, oh, by the way, he's Indigenous, and I didn't want that at all. But anyway, so anyway, I started with the premise that came about when in 1952, when Margaret Atwood wrote Survivor. It was about the importance of a Canadian culture. And at that point, it was kind of on the line. But most of us, including me, had been raised reading, listening to American music, or other, but not Canadian. And the same with our fiction. And so I was really taken aback by the fact that she said, what would happen? I think this is an image that should matter to all of us. What would happen if every day you looked in the mirror and the reflection you got was not your own? And that's what happens if you live with a culture that doesn't include everybody. And I think that, to me, that just stuck with me. Then Ted and I had another experience quite close to that. We were teaching at Petoka I could say that usually, Petoka Women's School near Cutknife. And they were adult class. This is probably 30 years ago. They were an adult class, and they were mostly of the Cree culture, Northern Cree culture. And so we thought, well, it was exciting because it was a first. And so we went searching for a novel that we could all talk about. No luck. And we looked and we asked everyone we knew, and we ended up teaching a novel called Laughing Boy by Oliver Lafarge. And it won the Pulitzer Prize in the US. Oliver Lafarge is a white archaeologist, and the book took place in among the Navajo people in 1915. Now, tell me, how much did that say to our guys who are living, in the same world we're living in? And I mean, the culture between the Navajo people and the Cree is very different. And of course, we spent the first half hour being totally boring and explaining what had gone wrong. And somebody put up their hand and said, "They've got brown faces. That's enough." And I thought, yeah, that is. We want to see ourselves, and that's how much it matters. And that if you suddenly start to open that very narrow, swath of characterization, where we exclude people because of color, sexual orientation, gender, anything, then all of a sudden we're cutting ourselves off from life. And I have become so passionate about, I really am, and I really applaud both of you for doing this, because it is something that matters. I mean, we live in this world. I have had, right from the beginning of the 22 books or whatever, I have always had gay characters because I live with people who are gay, and my children have grown up with that. And I will say proudly, they are they're all straight, but they're the most militant in making certain that we all understand each other. And I honestly see, it sounds as if I really being, I think, too didactic about it, but no, because the reason we're mean to one another, are hostile, is because we never listen to the other guy. I mean, that seems like a pretty simple explanation, but I believe it's part of it. Once we start to read how the other person sees life, then maybe
that's very, very important to do. And I think we as writers have to really pay attention to the power that we sometimes have when we are writing about underrepresented people and what we are saying based on who that audience is. Now, Gail, do you have any secrets that you can share with Candas and I as far as how you do keep track of your characters after 22 books? Like, how do you avoid losing track of them, or as Candas said, just doing like little check mark paragraphs to say like, okay, I got to talk about so and so? Do you do that, or does your editor do that?
Oh no, they don't do it. I mean they no, because it's then I'm making them do my job. That's my job, to make certain those things are organically worked in. I hate that term, organically, but there it was. But that they're worked in a natural way. And I mean, and I do think about it, and I'm aware of that. But Joanne has the thing is, Joanne lives in, this is another big point. Guess what? Joanne lives in a real world. How many people are in your world? I mean, me, you, Candas, all of us. Yeah. There are, we have, I couldn't even count. And
Half
also,
the thousands.
yeah, and would you want them all in the same room at the same time? No, but because you love them, you have them one of, and that's the way to do it. Or you can bring two groups into the same dinner party and have that there. And I think they're just in our real lives, this is in our real lives, there are so many situations where you think, I wonder if I could blame, well, if I could have those two. I mean, in our family, because we're us, and I love so many of our Texas relatives so much, and I have loved them forever and ever. We simply cannot talk politics. That's it.
Yes, well, that's a good rule almost anywhere.
Yeah, I made that rule. I made that for myself.
Well, Gail, I think that's a bit of genius. If I think I heard you right. I mean, if you care enough about your characters as you would for the people in your circle of family and friends, you're not going to forget about writing them or saying what needs to be said about them in a book,
no.
book 3 or book 23, because it's really that whole family that you've created, and you remember them as well as you remember your real life family and friends, and
they continue.
And that's what really, I gotta say, that's what I love most. Reading your book. If I may, you didn't spend a lot of time on each character's backstory. It was extremely minimal because we join the story in medias res, and we move with the characters through this section of their life, and I love that. It makes it sort of a joy. Like, what do they, if you know the series, you can say, what are they doing? But if you don't know the series, you can just say, here are these interesting people who are doing this stuff. And I think that's something that you do just so beautifully, because you just, like, you have all these people who are themselves.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Candace. And it's one of the things that Gail taught me very early on, is that things can also happen to these people between books. And I remember talking to you about that, Gail, when I was an upstart, and that blew my mind that could be a thing. Anyways, I want to move on to another topic here, and it's about the use of amateur/accidental sleuth. So Gail, like Candace, I mean, your main character is what could be referred to as an amateur or accidental sleuth. So in Legacy, we have Joanne worried about this potential threat against her family and tied to a family wedding. And it's all has to do with, these memories of a long ago seminar that led to 2 deaths and a murder conviction. Yet never in your series, at least to my memory, does Joanne ever proclaim that she's a detective and she wants to start a formal investigation. And I think because so many of your storylines are very intimately tied to Joanne's own family or friends circle, that's how she becomes involved. And for Joanne, I think this is something that you say in the books at one point, when it comes to threats to her family or her friends, the only thing worse than knowing is not knowing. So she's got to know. And so I wonder if, given the fact, I think you had opportunities, because Joanne has had a lot of career and life changes throughout the series. Did you ever consider turning her into an actual detective and hanging her shingle out?
No, that would have probably been the smartest thing to do, Anthony. No, and I mean, she had, this is something about living in Regina or living in Saskatchewan. When I started Joanne, I mentioned that I thought there were underrepresented characters in many books. And one of the reasons that I chose Joanne, who is hardly going to be a hot sell to a publisher, is, okay, do you want a book about a middle-aged woman no one's ever heard of? And she's a widow. She got 3 kids at home. And she's in this really bad sitch because she has to finish her PhD if she's going to get a real job at a university. But now she needs money because that bastard of a husband, that unfortunate man.
No swearing on this channel.
And following this. Anyway, but he was busy with others and did not leave. much money. So she's got, I mean, that's a real life situation, except, all the husbands are good, but no. Anyway, my husband is yours, your husbands, our husbands,
They're
the
ace.
best. We're the best. So anyway, so you've got all of this going on for her. She is a real person with real problems, and that allows you to get into many different worlds. And except for having, and I'm so grateful for my husband who's sitting out there waiting, as he always does. He's so good to me. But anyway, except for that, everything there is true about me. When the NDP lost the election down here. Oh, whoops. I didn't know. Anyway, we moved down here. Alan Blakeney was going to, Teb's going to be Alan Blakeney's speechwriter. I was just finishing my PhD. I passed my comps the day before my third child was born. That's how close it was.
Oh, wow.
That was my plan. My plan was, well, we're going to be Ted and Gail, always raising the children together. All of a sudden, somebody's off there having great dinners, and I'm sitting there eating SpaghettiOs, and I'm 9 pregnant, and I don't remember anything about the 19th century from my comps. And so there was a certain amount of resentment there, as you can imagine. But this is the thing. These are situations that people do understand. That's life. Yeah. You hit those moments. I remember my son, Max, who was 5, came in and said, I was studying and vastly pregnant. And he said, Mom, are you ever going to have any friends in Regina? I said, no, Max, I'm not. That was it. To a 5-year-old child, your mother will never make another friend. What kind of mothering is that? But it's but I've always been really a great mother, except the time when it kind of.
Now, Candace,
the fact that Joanne lives in Regina is huge. I mean, it's like setting books in Edmonton was, setting books in Calgary, Saskatoon, Regina. I remember seeing a Bub Slug cartoon once that said, life is like a highway in Saskatchewan, nothing much along the way, and Regina at the end of it. Right. and you think, okay, but Joanne's Regina is like vibrant and vivid and full of life, and stuff is going on there. And that's huge.
Yeah, and that's what we need to do. And we're not making anything up when we write about our various prairie states. We're giving people a different view that it's not the stereotype that they're so wanting to believe. Now, Candace, I just want to ask before we leave this subject, when you began Epitome Apartments series, did you have a discussion, with your publisher or just with yourself, whether you would want to work with an amateur versus a professional sleuth? Was that
No, that wasn't how it worked. I just heard this voice saying I hate show tunes, and it went on from there.
I hate show.
The only thing I did, the first book
I remember
says,
that,
I hate show tunes is the first line. And show tunes are drifting in on the breeze from the apartment next door. But at first my detective, as you guys know, is nameless. She has a name, but it's never said, and never will be. But I was gonna nameless the city as well, so I mixed in some things from other cities. The Epitome Apartments was actually a place that my friend Judy Merrill lived in Toronto when I first knew her, and people did call it the Epitome. And
that's what I was going to ask. Because
Yeah.
I see it on that. I thought that was, to me, that said everything you need to say about that. The Epitome Apartments that everybody, I mean, where you had made it clear that they were, it was Epitome, sorry. But when they called it that, to me, that just said a whole lot.
Yeah.
And
one of the British reviewers called it the Epiphany Apartments. And I'm just waiting to use that, because I just love that, they all live in the Epiphany Apartments. Okay, then. So at some point we'll have an epiphany. But I soon devolved to Edmonton because I was using our restaurants and our streets and my neighborhood. I live right in the East inner city. And, you know, in one of the books I say, why is it always the East side that has the bad reputation? And so they go to real places to eat and they walk down real streets. I've placed the Epitome Apartments basically in a vacant lot so that it can have its own life, but I could show you where it would live if it lived there. And that's partly just to have fun, but I think also partly to say location has meaning, you know. So the fact that these stories take place in the inner city and the streets are the way they are and the buildings are the way they are and the neighborhood connections are the way they are, and the restaurants that you frequent are different than you'd frequent if you were a suburban person or if you were in a very Tony neighborhood, and that ends up having significance, having importance, and you know, I've written in the past about the significance of place and setting things in our places, and I just decided I would just, you know, go with it. But it's also kind of fun. Like when I was first writing, I didn't borrow a lot from my own life or people I knew, or I didn't name check real people or real places. Mind you, I was writing speculative fiction, but even so, you know, there are writers who sort of draw on yourself, and I didn't actually feel free to do that until these books, and then I just decided it would be kind of fun, and anybody who didn't know the city wouldn't know the reference, but it would still make sense. So I threw in a lot of things, and I throw in a lot of pop culture references that are fun, and some of them are very specific to me. And so, you know, if my friends or family read them, they can have a little chuckle, but they're still, I mean, I hope they're still kind of funny, even if you don't know everything about the context. But that was the thing I had to get free enough to do.
But that, I think that's not only freeing, but it is a very convenient way of saying a whole lot in a few words. I can, or I'll tell you right now, where I'm sitting is 10 minutes from North Central Regina. I sit in an area that my mother proudly, during the Colin Thatcher murder, was so proud of the fact that every time that our area was referred to, the reference was to fashionable upper class Lakeview. There was a murder here, Mum. But, you know, no, but we were fashionable upper class Lakeview. So I live in fashionable upper class Lakeview. We were blah. And I mean, it's just a nice area, you know, lots of big trees. 10 minutes from here is North Central, which Maclean's magazine called the worst neighborhood in Canada. Now, I can identify that break just in those two. I wouldn't tell them about my mother. I mean, forget it. But I could make that 10-minute, and then people would know what I was talking about. And so I think that could be, and because everybody has that in their city, there are those breaks. I mean, I remember walking down, my daughter and I were in Chicago, and she wanted to see something and I wanted to see something. I walked down the main drag that was all the diamonds, you know, the $1 Million Mile or whatever they call it. And I love Chicago. She walked down another alley and she came running out. My daughter, you know, she doesn't seek her mother's need or desire to nurture, but she was out of there. She said, I don't think so. And she stayed with her mother. I mean, there can be those two, and the fact that there can be those, it's almost like the old prairie, you know, the old prairie things they used to do in the towns where they built the false front out front, and you know, and you can just say that, and it's established without having to go through, you know, a whole lot of detail to establish it. Everyone knows that place. I mean, every city has that.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I think this, like we're talking about place, but this really leads in nicely to the next thing I want to ask the two of you. I mean, I think that one of the most admirable and powerful things that both of you do in your series is that you've consciously taken the traditional mystery genre that's been around since what, the early 19th century or maybe earlier. And you've shaped it into a series of novels that reflect what you want to say and what you feel is important to communicate to the world. So first, and same question to both of you, do you agree with that? Am I right about that? And if so, talk to us about what you hope you were saying in your work and how it works in relationship with the demographic of your readers. I mean, do you just write what you want to write and hope they understand, or are you more careful or circumspect about it? Gail, do you want to answer that first?
Well, I think that, with me, because I was, Tony, I pointed out to you the other day that way back in Burying Ariel, I had a character who, that was a long time ago, who was undergoing a transfer, a gender transfer. And at the end, I said, there's no reason why you would have had the book around, but Joanne never, I mean, Joanne certainly knows, and they work very quiet. I mean, she's an incidental character, and although she's quite important, the secondary character, they work along without ever any comment on that. And at the end, the woman says to Joanne, thanks for not, she says, I like you, and she says, and thanks for not making a big deal of this. And it's very obvious to Joanne what she's talking about. Joanne says, look, this is no bowl of cherries on either side. And, that's exactly how she treats that, and that gender affirmation thing was probably 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
It matters.
Yeah. And I want to add, go on really excitedly from there. Yes, I think we do that, but John Gardner wrote a book called On Moral Fiction, which I later understood to have been controversial at the time, but I didn't perceive it as that. I perceived it as a kind of really a core concept. He talked about how, particularly genre fiction, but certain fictions were about pursuing a certain, he called it moral outcome, and he didn't mean religious or goody two shoes. He meant an outcome where, say, good versus evil, justice versus injustice, right versus wrong. Eleanor Arneson wrote a beautiful book in which it was shoddiness versus quality. It was a fantasy novel, so it was magic. So it was shoddy magic or good magic rather than sort of good and evil. And the monsters weren't like Lord of the Rings monsters. They were mediocre monsters. And it was mediocrity that she was fighting. So there's all sorts of ways to look at this dichotomy. But in crime fiction, a crime equals a wrongness in the universe. And something has to happen over the course of the book to address or adjust it. Most books adjust it. Most books move toward a just outcome of some sort. Some of them have a cynical just outcome where some things get resolved and other things don't. And then there's sort of Mr. Ripley, who just always gets away with it. But it's disquieting for readers to read that, because they understand that something in their belief about the natural order has been subverted by wrong. So we're already in a genre that is interested in justice. So it's not that much of a stretch to say, why can't this genre happen among the people I know, or the people who are underrepresented or whatever, because that's another kind of being just. And just as Gail said, just having them there, or having us there, or whatever, is enough.
Yeah.
Is enough to make that movement obvious. So I think that speculative fiction, mystery, even romance, we see a lot of romance that's taking on these same topics. Because they are about something around happily ever after, or the healing of the land, or justice is done and the murderer is caught. That process lends itself really, really well to getting rid of the uncanny valley and the whole idea of othering, and bringing people into the light in in an equal way. So I do, it's kind of interesting because I won an award for one of the books for best traditional mystery with these queer characters and uh, um, street people and so on. But yes, it's a traditional mystery because it takes on front and center. This is an unjust thing, and we will do something, whatever we can do as humans, to create justice. And I think that's an important part of the genre, and I think it's why people love it, because we help them right their wrongs. Look at all the middle-aged women who are older than middle-aged like me who love Lee Child books because this 6'5" guy goes out and he always wins his fights. And so many of our fights we lose. So he has a huge readership of people just like me who want to win from time to time, right? So this happens all the way across the genre.
But I think also, you know, we are on, and I am astounded at this, but I think I mentioned it to Tony. We now, right now, are on the cusp of a real change in people's attitudes towards sexuality. My grandson and I will tell you, okay, when my grandson started high school, he's straight. And, you know, and he has a lot of just friends who are in varying places along understanding. And so, and he goes to a Catholic school, and I'll tell you, his mother and I, and well, all of us, but his mother and I have always been so militant about, listen, this is how it is. These are human beings, forget the other. And just, I mean, don't, and of course, you know, so he is the one who corrects me now when I use a pronoun, you know, Baba, I mean, Mimi, it's not, you know. But he, in his Catholic school, we're not Catholic, we're Anglicans, but he, after 4 years there, he had sort of formed an informal club to just pull people together. And he got an award from a Catholic school for making our high school, more welcoming to everybody. That made me more proud of him than anything, because that shows, I think he's, of course, they're my grandchildren. Of course, they're perfect, practically perfect in every way. But
everybody says so.
I know, Mary Poppins, sure. But, you know, we have been, those of us who are our age, we have watched that change. Yes. You know, one of my dearest friends in the whole world, same age as me, and he's been very active, has a great job and he's just a terrific person. But he is in every single area. He came out when I met him, and we're 81. And so he didn't come out because of me, although that may have just been enough. That, oh God, I got to over to something better than this. But, you know, we have been friends all these years. And talked to me the other day. We talk about it all the time. He has been very active, and having a great job in the feds, but also very active whenever it was going. During AIDS, that was his, and he got a medal from the government of Ontario. And I thought, this is starting to move. I've said to my daughter 100 million times, because she's like her mother, she gets mad. But I've tried to calm her down. I said, this is incremental. We're going to have to just take it the way it comes. But every chance we have, that's when you have to do what you can.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And you know, and I mean, that's been a huge thing for us. And you have no idea how much it means to me as an Anglican and a practicing Anglican my whole life. That you know, I watch now every single day the show from Canterbury Cathedral, where the dean, who is gay, and his partner at the Anglican Church. I mean, my God, that's just yeah. I mean, we're moving.
I remember Anglican friends 30 years ago saying, "You'll bless the pets, but you won't bless us." You know, and that's a huge change from that. In our lifetimes.
We've moved forward, that's for sure.
We have.
None of you seem to me to be very fearful people. I think you're not fearful of breaking rules or dealing with taboos. But has there been anything in your long and illustrious careers? Has there been a taboo topic or a character or a type of storyline that you just thought, I am not going to tackle that one?
I've got one. I I see people who write from the point of view of the killers or the really evil people, and they have these sections of the book where they're in the persona of that person. I freely admit I can't do that. I tried to do that with previous books, and I just don't want to spend that much time in the head of someone I consider evil. I don't think it's good for my soul. And I'm, you know, under those circumstances, it's not good for my book either, because I would be somehow resistant and I would retreat to something stereotypical or something, you know. So I don't do that. Like, I try, even my sort of harsher characters that are my point of view characters, I think they end up defaulting toward kindness. I think they do. In the face of extreme difficulties in many cases. But I would like people to take from just the shape of my books, I would like them to take the thought that we can be in the midst of great tribulation, but we can find some non-religious kind of redemption, if you will, because you know, redemption is bigger than
course,
a
yeah.
faith community, you know. And I think it may be, you know, some would consider it a weakness as a writer that I don't want to go into those heads, that I am somehow limiting myself, and I am, but it's because I just don't want to spend that I don't want to swim in that kind of water, you know. It's polluted, totally, and you breathe it in, and it's icky. And
I don't know if either of you know the writer Edward O. Phillips, and he wrote the Sunday series of books and won a, you know, CWC Best Crime Novel, and he did that. Like, he wrote as the murderer. And I remember thinking, like, how can you do this book after book after book after book? It's I don't know if it's a strength or a quirk in a character. But what about you, Gail? Any taboos or anything you've been fearful of writing, or just decided that's not for
no, I when you were saying all this, I was thinking, you know, I actually get really, people are very close to Joanne, and I get very, very nice mail about her, and you know, just Joanne, people like her. She's much, I try to say, I want to have note paper that says at the top, I'm not nearly as nice as Joanne. This is from Gail, you know. But Joanne had, when she meets Zach, and I think she has in her entire life, as she points out to him, she has slept with 3 men. One was her husband, and she was a virgin when she married him. He died after 20 years. She had one kind of thing and didn't, you know, wasn't going to work. And she married Zach. So this is the 3rd guy she's ever slept with. And I think they've known each other about 5 weeks. And she's 50, I think, at that point. And I got quite a bit of mail about her sleeping with him after 5 weeks. She's 50. Like, do we have a time? Is there, you know, do you get it? You know, and that would baffle me. I mean, I've never, not to. It's
so interesting. Like, I wonder if it was because it was Joanne, or
it was Joanne
because of her age, or what. I think the genesis.
I don't know. It was interesting to me, and because I'm afraid my sexual my record is lower than Joanne's. I have got married.
This is a whole different podcast now.
I've been married 55 years, and you know, that was it. Beginning, and I was also raised during the era where my mother said to me, if you ever go to bed with a man before you're married, you'll spend your entire life on your back. I had no idea what that
meant. Your mother's come up several times in this conversation.
My mother.
I kind of think we might need to go back and have a word with your mother.
No, actually, my mother changed as few words as possible during my life.
So, Gail and Candace, on your behalf, you won't believe it, but we are coming to the end of our time together. Really? We only have a few minutes left, and we're going to you participants, we are going to end our time together a little bit differently than you might have expected. Some of you will know, some won't, that Gail has recently gone through a multi-month odyssey, I'll call it. And I know that she's very aware of and appreciative of how many of her readers care for her just because of the wonderful human being that she is. And as such, she has graciously agreed to just end us off today with a few thoughts about that experience. So Gail, let me turn it over to you.
Okay, well, I actually wrote a couple of these things down because just because we don't want to go on forever, and I wanted to keep it kind of focused. But I'll start with the beginning, which was on November 29th in 2022. I went to bed perfectly. That was it, normal. I woke up the next morning and I couldn't walk. And I was not, this is where there's something strange. I was not a bit alarmed. My son and his girlfriend came by. I have no idea why, but they were there. And I was just sitting on this bathroom floor reading Sports Illustrated, apparently not a single bit concerned. And they called for an ambulance. And I said, don't be stupid. We always settle things ourselves. And of course, there was the ambulance. And I mean, within a day, well, there was a young surgeon there who performed a very complex surgery on me because I had my intestines had wrapped themselves around a tumor, not malevolent, but I mean, it was, pretty serious stuff. And so the surgeon for that, I'm going to say his name because I am so grateful to all of them. Anyway, and his name was Dr. James Holden. He's just a young guy. They're all young though now, Anyway, but anyway, and Dr. Holden said to Nathaniel, my son, who was there at the time, I took more of Gail out than I left in. And so that was, he has received many compliments since for, the fact that he really did save my life. And, and also that he's apparently good at stitching. Anyway, and then, so I'm very glad to be alive. Part 2 was that somewhere along the line, I got a pressure ulcer, which could have killed me. And the doctor there was Dr. Christopher Ledding, who took over my care, and under very, very strict instructions that I was to not leave the bed for 8 weeks. And that meant I spent 8 weeks of my life lying on my side and with my right buttocks up, but not anywhere else. And meanwhile, every 3 weeks, 2 nurses would exchange a little instrument in me that was called a wound vacuum, and it kept the wound dry. That little piece of material cost between $25,000 and $30,000. I did not get to keep it, but anyway, that's the kind of treatment I got. So anyway, so after 6 weeks, as soon as I was allowed, it was 8 weeks when I was allowed finally to get out of bed and sit in a chair. And then that was just an amazing moment for me. I was then, and so it goes. I sat in the chair and then I was back in bed and still isolated. Then I finally got to, they brought in something that was called a weight-bearing something or other weight-bearing thing. And it looked like an ironing board, and I stood on it, and I had my two physios, one on either side, always right beside me, so nothing would go wrong. So I stood, and they said, well, put your hands across the what would be the middle part of the ironing board and try and stand. And I was able to, it was like just a second and a half, I think, but I could feel that my legs still were there. And I cried. It was the only, I think the only other time I cried was when somebody told me that both those doctors had saved my life. And I thought, wait a minute. Anyway, so after that, I did the ironing board thing, and then I was able to start physio after a while. And I had my 2 wonderful physios with me. This is why I always worry about the awards. And anyway, but anyway, it doesn't matter, but it does. Anyway, the 2 physios with me who were with me the whole time. And I had to go through, I had to learn to walk, and I'm still not walking. I'm still here, but I have to use a walker and a wheelchair. I did 11 steps when I sent Tony a note yesterday, I said, I did 11
Yes.
steps. That's me. That's where I am. And so I am, and I want to tell my one last story, because although I told this to Tony already, I had to be able to do stairs because we have a home with stairs, and they wouldn't let me leave the hospital until I could. And I seemed always to getting stuck on, I had to be able to do 11. I think I got stuck on 9 every time. And it just seemed like it was never going to end. I just would kind of lose breath or just get out of breath or panic or whatever. But anyway, so one of my physios, Laura Lee, her name was, said to me, who are you crushing on now? And I wouldn't have even known that term if I hadn't had granddaughters, but I knew what crushing meant. And I thought, well, the night before I had watched Spotlight, and in Spotlight, the actor was, I had to write his name down too because I was afraid I'd miss it. Oh, it's Mark Ruffalo. And Mark Ruffalo. And so the next time I went in, there was a great big, and to do my stairs, the top of the stairs, there was a great big photo of Mark Ruffalo. And so as soon as I got to step 8 or 9 and started breathing heavily, Laura Lee said, she's coming, Mark. She's coming. Come on. She's almost there. You're almost there, aren't you? It's coming, isn't it? And it got considerably more rebel than that. But anyway, Mark brought me to step 11.
You heard it here, folks. Gail Bowen is crushing after the Hulk.
That's
Mark Ruffalo.
Anyway, I thank him. I thank him for his kindness and for his incredible sexiness. I had to actually go watch a movie afterwards. Anyway, never you mind. Thank you. This was so much fun.
Okay,
Thanks
well,
for
Gail,
asking.
I know this probably would have been a personal and private thing, but you are beloved, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us in this room today to say thank you, to share this with us, and we are so glad you are on the other side of this. To Canvas, many thanks to you and all you do and continue to do in our industry, sharing your many talents with us through your writing, through your advocacy, through your educational and consulting pursuits, through your volunteer efforts. You two are just amazing people, and I'm thrilled that we could spend this time with you today. Many thanks to all of the participants for joining us today. Remember that Legacy by Gail Bowen and He Wasn't There Today, again today, by Candas Jane Dorsey, are both available for purchase and pre-order. And one last thing, let me conclude by paraphrasing one of Gail's latest blog entries, where she says, here's to staying in the race, never giving up, embracing who and what we are, and the simple glory of being alive. No more wiser words than from you, Gail. So thank you.